praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Ain't got time to die, 'cause when I'm a helping the sick.
9 o'clock here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and across the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. This is VFM 99.9, the Clean First Now. And it's now time for us to present to you this evening's program, the Full and Abundant Life radio program, hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. Just to let you know, this evening's topic deals with the family and childhood development, and we certainly would love to hear from you. Make it a very interesting one. 457-9997 is the number to call. You can send us a WhatsApp message. You can place a WhatsApp call or call us direct to be a part of this evening's program. So without further ado, it's time for us to turn you over to Dr. Davis as I welcome him. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome to EFM.
Welcome and good night. I'm trying to do my setup here. I'm kind of running late on that, but it's okay. But I was kind of late sending you the email and finally got that done. But as I mentioned here tonight, that I want to begin a series on the family and childhood development. And I felt based on what's happening in our world today, that we need to really spend some time looking at, what's happening to our family and what we can do as a society, as a people, and especially within the religious community. And of course, many of us are faced with many challenges, especially for those of us who are counselors working in the field of social work, psychology, and psychiatry, and just some of the other areas where people are truly involved in terms of working with families and especially with what's happening with our children. So I thought tonight that it might be helpful for us to be able to do that. And Kamal, I certainly want to thank you for doing advertising it today, and I listened from time to time that you were promoting it. So I hope that the people there in St. Vincent and those of you who are involved in terms of whether it be on the Facebook page or on the YouTube will certainly take this opportunity to express your thoughts and your ideas as we endeavor tonight to truly explore this. And tonight, this would be the first night, of course, and we certainly will try to continue this as we go by. But for tonight, let's just focus on the family. And I really want to talk about, when we talk about the family tonight, I want us to not just look at it from the standpoint of from the religious point of view, but also to look at it from a holistic standpoint, because I think that there are many other areas that do impact the family. And so my goal tonight is a very simple one, maybe a little ambitious, of course, but I want to challenge us to really begin to look at how we can begin to detoxify the social environment in such a way that we can begin to strengthen our kids and strengthen parents so that we can give them the skill that they would need in order to resist the toxic elements that is so pervasive and enduring in terms of culture and in our society today. And so, like I said, that's a very ambitious goal, obviously, but I think we are all working at this at different levels. I think educators are having a challenge in terms of within the education system. I think politicians are grappling with this as well, in terms of how do we reduce crime and violence. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend of mine just today and he was sharing with me that there were 5 young men that were murdered in one of the Caribbean islands this week. And three of those young men are her family members, and how broken she is at this particular time. And then she went ahead to explain, the kind of background that these youngsters came from. And as she, shared that, in one instance, she was talking about how a mother of one of these youngsters was murdered, how the mother had to work, and in order to keep things afloat, that she would go to work and then she would leave her job just to come home in time just to breastfeed the child. And then she would leave the child at home alone, and then she would go back to work. And I tried in my mind to envision what that would mean for a child, that, the only time that that child will have some quality contact was in the feeding moment, and that the hours that would go by after that child will certainly be alone. The other youngster that she was trying to explain to me was the fact that the father had died early, and that the mother really was just didn't exist there, and how other family member had to, pitch in to help on this. And two of those boys were with different fathers, and so when she unfolded the story, I was thinking about, if we talk about how we raise our children, and how important it is for us to create a nurturing, healthy, stimulating environment where we can, endeavor to move children into the adult world, and to give them the skill that are so vital and critical for them, so that they can begin to make wise decisions as they go through all of those different developmental stages that they must go through, and to face all the challenges. So I thought about that. And then just this week also, we had right here in Manhattan, in New York, where a gentleman actually went and murdered 5 people, and then turned the gun on himself. And this is right here in the city. So when you look at all of these different, violence, and you have to understand, what exactly can we do, and what exactly is going wrong, where a person can actually go to a building where folks are working and actually execute 5 people, and then turn the gun on himself. And then in the Caribbean island that I just saw, where I just talked to you about, were 5 youngsters, and these youngsters range from I think 21 to about 24. 5 of them were murdered. And of course, I would imagine that this may have to do with some gang related activities. But the point here is that we have to understand that our children are truly vulnerable, and that they are in situations that we have to begin to step back and begin to ask some tough questions. How can we reverse this process? Where are we going wrong? And what is it that we can do? And, we certainly, I hear Jesus making the statement in John, such a famous statement, John chapter 19 and verse 30, when he says, at the very moment, he says, it is finished. And of course, he was talking about the procurement of redemption, where we now can begin to live out the life that God engineered or designed us to be. And he's saying that as a result of my sacrifice, as a result of my death, parents would now be able to have the power, the wisdom, and the guidance to be able to nurture and to raise children into adults, who would take them from childhood into an adult, where they can now take their rightful place in society. But when we look here, we see that this is not always the case. We see that many of our children, as a matter of fact, I just read an article where, actually it was on the news, where a baby was found out in front of a neighbor's door, out in the yard, and right next door, close by, in another home, there were four people, I think, were murdered, and they're trying to connect, the fact that this infant was left on somebody's doorstep, and right down the road there, five people were in fact murdered. So we know that a lot of bad things happen, a lot of ugliness are happening, and of course, I don't want to be too critical, but in all of our communities, we see these elaborate buildings with signs out front that says some religious institution of some kind. And sometimes on Sundays or Saturdays, we see herds of people are going into these places with their Bibles and talking about how sweet Jesus is and how wonderful it is. But at the same time, we see what's happening in our educational system, what's happening in our middle school, what's happening in our high schools, where teachers and principals and administrators are struggling every day to deal with problem boys and problem girls. And so on one hand, we are talking about how the efficacy of Jesus and how wonderful the gospel is and how powerful it is. My question tonight is, how can we take this power? How can we take all of this and battle it up somehow and being able to distribute it to all of these different families and to enhance the life, the quality of people, so that our children can in fact have a better opportunity in life? So that's kind of where I want us to begin to really talk about the impact that our family is having in terms of in childhood development, and what is it that we as institutions, as our governments, as religious leaders and teachers and social workers, what is it that we can collaborate together to develop effective programs? And I'm not saying that there aren't some of these programs, and certainly there are a lot of other institutions that are doing the very best that they can, to be able to develop remedial programs and to be able to strengthen families, and they're working desperately in order to do this. All I'm saying to us tonight, that maybe it's not enough, and maybe we need to have more hands on deck, and we need to have more families and more people involved, and especially within the religious community. I think we have to begin to see the mission of Christ and the gospel message. It's not just a Sunday morning message, but it's a message about transformation. It's a message about changing the quality of individual lives at all different levels. And we're talking about every aspect of our society. We have to look at our musical industries. We have to look at our political arenas. We have to look at our judicial system. We have to look at our entertainment system, our educational system, how people live, the working situation, all of those things, the politics, the education, the employment, healthcare, all of these, I think, do have a significant impact on the well-being of our children. And it's not just, it's okay to say, well, we just need to have people turn to Jesus. And of course, that is true, but I think it's a lot more than that tonight. When you look at what's happening, I think we have to begin. Yes, that is true. We need to do that. But even within the religious communities themselves, you have super wealthy churches, and you have, dire poor, churches themselves, and you have highly educated, highly functioning individuals in certain local churches, and then you have on the other side of that. And so you have some of the nastiness across the board. We see nastiness in politics. We see it in homes. We see it in churches. We see it just in every aspect of our society. So I think we have to step back and take a good look at, because you see, adults, criminal adults, came from a home. They were nurtured a certain way. So all I'm saying to us, we need to go back and really look at how our children are being raised. And Samantha, it's certainly a privilege to have you with us here tonight. And Stephanie, it's great to have you. Patricia, it's certainly good to have you. Nathaniel is certainly it's a privilege to have you as well, Linda. And so I hope I will spend some time taking some glance at some of the Facebook pages if you want to comment there. And certainly Kamal would be monitoring the phone lines. And as he mentioned, this is a time when we certainly need to have you share your thoughts and your ideas. And of course, like I said tonight, I'm hoping that within this series, that the ultimate focus is to begin to talk about ways how we can strengthen our families to be able to resist some of the toxic elements that seem to be so pervasive within our society today. Culturally, we see things are changing rapidly. And I know we kind of look at it in a sort of a pessimistic way, and rightfully so at times. But I believe, given the level of what we're seeing in our society, what this says to us, that the doors are wide open for us to come up and begin to talk together, to collaborate together, to come up with intervention, not with financial resources, but also to put all of our human resources together, put all of our social workers together, all of our counselors together, all of our professionals together, and let us see how we can sit at the same table and begin to have some dialogue and some conversation as to what we can do within our community at small levels. How can we strengthen our families? I think all these things are really critical for us. And I think, what I'm asking tonight is really, it's a goal that might be ambitious, but I think I think we can achieve it. I think this is something that is realistic. But I also think tonight that it is imperative that we see the urgency of what's happening in our society, the ugliness, the level of domestic violence, the crimes that are committing, that our young people are involved in, the level of incarcerations, the murders. Like I just said, 5 kids in a Caribbean island. I don't want to mention which island it is, but 5 just this week were just murdered. And we're talking about kids in the age of 20 to 24-year-old youngsters. And in one case, 3 of these young men are within one family system. So I know on that island right now that parents, well, not necessarily parents, because parents didn't care. Because the only question they said to the parents, I said, well, who's going to do the funeral? Well, there's no parents, nobody cares, But families have to come together, to pitch in together, to begin to mourn together, and be able to do what they need to do to put these 5 boys, in the ground. And so it's a very sad time in which we live. And so, I want to open this for us to have some discussions and all of this. And, I believe that communicating, we have to, not only communicate in terms of teaching, but we also have to include the modeling of that theory. Yes, it is true that we need to bring theory to the table, but I think also theory is important, but we also have to think in terms of the modeling as well. We have to begin to work out the theory within our lives so that our young people can see what it truly means to love and to honor each other and to honor self. We have to begin to model that. And I think sometimes we become so didactic, so intellectual, that we think by simply
We have
just...
a caller.
Go ahead, caller. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, good night.
Good night, sir.
Yeah, I just happened to tune in. Just give me a small update. I assume it's from a religious background and so on and thing. Would you mind, just for my sake, so then because you raised some issues there that I would like to make mention of, but I need to know from which religious background are you speaking from, first and foremost.
Well, I mean, this program tonight is kind of a very wide program to where we are looking at all the different variables that do have an impact on the quality of people's lives. I think poverty have an impact on people's lives. People's mental health have an impact on the quality of life. I think the family system has an impact on the family life, and of course the religious aspect as well. So all of that, I think, have an impact on everything that we do. And so I don't want to narrow our discussion on one particular denomination. You follow?
No, but the point is, I even don't know who I'm speaking with first and foremost, so I don't know the religious background.
Oh.
You just-
Okay, no, I understand. Yeah. Well, I am. Wait, what? You're in St. Vincent, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, you're in St. Vincent. And what part of St. Vincent are you from?
And the windward side of the island.
Okay, and the windward side of the island. Okay, I'm just trying to think of a religious group that you may be familiar with that may connect me with that. There is the Kingston Church of Christ. There is the Retreat Church of Christ. There is the Bible Church of Christ. There is the Honorsville Church of Christ. So there is also there. I think there's a program on WeFM at 6
on Tuesdays.
And Tuesday with Jack, Joel Jack.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very well.
Yeah, Jack may not want to be associated with it, but we're the same religious group. Okay, I shouldn't even have mentioned his name, but please forgive me, Jack, if I offended anyway. But yes, we in the same kind of faith. So that gives you an idea.
Okay.
Of what it is.
It gives me an idea. But my issue is that many of the churches, them, when you call for a together a day of prayer, you will get that we don't associate with those groups, so they don't turn up for prayer as a denomination, and one set of the denomination will do the prayers and so on, pray for our country, pray for our leaders and so on and things. And I have a problem with that because if we are working for the same master, we should be able to associate ourselves and affiliate with different denominations. What do you think about that?
Well, the theme tonight, if you listen to what I'm trying to say here tonight, that in order to fix the problem that we have would require every hand on deck. So it means then we have to begin to pool all of our resources together. And pulling all of our resources together, meaning that being able to get all of our social workers, being able to get all of our psychologists, irrespective of their religious experience or background, and be able to pull everybody together and begin to, dialogue together as to how we can begin to use our resources, not just our financial resources, but our human resources in strengthening families, being able to help families, young families. And so if that means we have to have a prayer before we go, sure, we can do that. But I think what the pushback might be is that, one of the central feature might be that, we have to have some common ground on which to be able to. Prayer is critical. And in order for us to be able to approach God, we have to be in relationship with him. And we have to have the utmost respect for him and his will. And so you can't be expecting, if you are not following his truth, following his will, to expect to run up on him and begin to ask for something that is needed. So I think it's important. I think the pushback might be, we must make sure that we're all on the same page. We're all speaking the same thing. So I'm going to give you just a far out example. For example, I'll find it difficult if a Muslim were to say to me that we need to have a prayer for this particular family, let's do it together.
Yeah.
Then the question becomes, who are we going to? Because my view is going to be that there is no way we can get to God other than through His Son, and He's going to say that His Son is not God, and therefore, Muhammad is the way to go. So we know here that prayer is not going to go anywhere. We have a problem here.
That's right.
We have to first.
We have a problem there, right?
Okay. So I think we can also reason with some of the other denominations that if we are so far apart in terms, because it says we must all agree together. Remember Jesus' last prayer? And it clearly says that the world would know that you are my disciple if we can be united. And so we have to be united in our belief system as well as our behavior. But if we are not accepting that and we are not living according to the will of God, then it might be problematic.
Yeah.
You follow? So I think that might be the pushback. But I think sometimes when we're in a crisis, though, we still need our politicians to help us out with programs, even though they may not be religious. We still expect them to enact policies that are going to help our families. You see what I'm going with this? So in that sense, I need to.
Yeah. What I think though, a lot of the churches in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are not up to date, assisting their members about political issues, about social issues. For instance, we here in St. Vincent are about to go in high gear in an election. How many of our churches and pastors will pull the members together and sensitize them on, not who to vote for, because that will cause some problem, but sensitize them on the issue when you go to the poll. What are you looking for in a political party and so on and thing? Because Jesus ministered to the whole man, both physically and spiritually. And while we are on this earth, we have to occupy until when Jesus comes. It doesn't make sense that we are so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good. So I think many times that we caught up, everything about a person should be spiritual, and the physical thing that we should know about that are lacking. And I know many of the pastors are declined from even use the word politics in the church. What are your views on that?
Well, I'm going to just comment and then move on from here. But I believe that equality is a political concept. In other words, for you and I to be able to enjoy our freedom and to have some reasonable sense of equality, you need a political system to ensure that. Otherwise, I will be driving on the street at 200 miles an hour. You follow? And run people over.
Yeah.
So you need a system, a political system, to ensure that you can have your rights. You have no rights if you don't have a political system. Even where you live, someone could come and just, take you home and do whatever they want to do. So you need, to exercise that freedom, that free will, you need a political system in order to do that. And so what we do is try to make the best judgment or choice in the selection of people that we feel are going to advance our best interests. And hence, that's why we have to go out and make decisions. What government will be able to develop, help us out in terms of ensuring that the policies that they put will enhance the educational system, to allocate enough money to ensure that kids that are suffering with special ed needs and difficulties to ensure that those kids aren't going to left behind. You need government with the incentive and the vision to be able to allocate resources to that. If we need a better health care for our children and our families, then we're going to be able to have an opportunity to select a government that seem to have that kind of a vision. And sometimes we're not always right, but we make the best guess, and sometimes they fail us, and sometimes they do what we want. So I believe that we have to begin to be involved in creating not only a community in terms of our local Sunday situation or whatever that is, but we have to begin to look at the wider society, because that's what's killing us right now. It's the wider society.
Very well too.
In the church. But let me just move on, because Samantha is saying here, and thank you for your call. And I think Samantha said, can you speak to the development of child, and what age does the family have an influence on the child? And basically, I want us to think about what. Go ahead. Thank you so much for your call, caller. But the proverb writer says that we are to train up a child in the way that he or she should go, so that when they get older, they will not depart from it. So what this is saying to us is, and Sigmund Freud did conclude his analysis, his age of development. He said by the time a child reaches the ages of 6, his character, his personality is set. I happen to share, I don't necessarily subscribe to that view, but I do believe that, we can change. And we see that in the Bible, because the Bible says very clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and I think verse 12, that such was some of you, but now you're changed. So I believe that our ego system, is adaptable, and we can always grow and we can always change. Doesn't matter. But I think the basic, within the first 6 years of life becomes critical, because that's when the personalities develop, the characters develop, and that's where you need the parent to be involved in that process. Because if the parents miss those critical first 6 years or so, if you add maybe 7, 8, doesn't matter, but within those critical years, that's when the character is shaped and the character is formed. But what we are seeing, though, is that because of financial situations and because of the single parenting situation, where you may have a parent, a single mother, who may have 3 children and have to do 3 jobs in order to feed and to support, and then these children are left without any guidance. And then what happens, this child goes to the school system, and because the child was not well trained, his behavior, and it may be some mental health issues that the child may develop, or it may be ADHD, where the child can't concentrate, and the child begin to act out in school, and next thing you know, the child is suspended or thrown out, but there's nobody at home because the mother is working. So the child is left home by himself or herself, and then you could tell what happened with that situation. And so I'm saying to us, when you talk about what age, I think we have to understand that is why God set up this system the way it is, and it is broken, obviously. But I think that the plan here is to have a mother and a father, and the Bible set it up in such a way that the father would be the person who is actually by the sweat of his brow would actually go out and be able to finance that family, and then the mother would be the one who'll be nurturing that child for the first 6 years or so, at least. That's what most of the psychologists are saying, and not only just psychologists, but I think a lot of neurologists are saying the same things, that the brain during those early phases, that's when they get developed and children learn things. And we have to understand that's something that the child comes into this world with 2 critical elements, 2 critical pieces that we need to understand. First of all, he enters the world with the divine DNA. And secondly, the child is blessed. The first day, the child is blessed. So you have a child now that is now become the ward or the Gavin custodian, which is the mom and dad. And this child with the divine DNA is now placed in the care of this mom and dad, and this mom and dad now is now going to nurture this divine DNA so that it can become healthy and become what God expects it to be. And I think that's where I think the educational system are struggling with. I think a lot of social workers are struggling with. How do you help this child? And I think it was Patrick Moynihan who once said, look, you can take a child and you send him to school and you can give him all of the food, you can give him all of the education. But if that child is going home to a home where there is abuse and there's neglect and there's ugliness and domestic violence, he's saying that the education becomes useless because the home itself becomes the educational system. That's where the implementation of all this thing is information is now being acted out and modeled, where a child needs monitoring, a child needs discipline, and all of that happens in those early first 6 years where the parent who genuinely, and the child should experience that love. And I said, if the home isn't, no matter how much the school is doing, it still will not work simply because the child needs this part to be involved as well. Let me just review and make sure that I'm not missing any of any comments here at all. And certainly I'll have someone viewing from Trinidad, Reed from Jamaica. So they're privileged to have you with us here tonight. And let me make sure that, but and Kamal, you can let me know if there's any comments that we need to have. But let me just talk about some of the overall issues that I really need to mention so that we can understand that. First of all, I need to say it very clearly. What we need to understand, have a clear, what is it that our children need? What are the needs of a child? You take from the first day of life, on to, say at least up to about 7 to 8 years. What is it that this child would need? And I think first of all, this child needs stability. You need a home where this child can be at peace, where mom and dad aren't fighting and cursing and the radio's blasting and things are breaking and the police is coming to the home. And you can't have that kind of a situation. You can't have a home where a child is being physically abused and neglected. A child is hungry. The child is wet and people are too busy to change the diaper. And the child sits there forever. We can't have that. The child needs a stable environment. The child needs to feel secure. As a matter of fact, most anxiety disorders start early in those formative years, where children begin to develop a sense of anxiety and panic disorder in those early phases. And so we have to begin to understand how important it is and I know that, parents, some mothers pride themselves, that they want to work and they want to do this and this is a woman's world. But I'm telling you something, that there's a huge trade-off here. And the trade-off is that those children, when you think that you have enough money and you can now send your child to a daycare center where you go and make money so you can have a bigger house and drive a better car, there is a tremendous trade-off because somebody else is now raising that child. It is they're shaping that personality of that child. And so we have to begin to understand, once you move away from that divine arrangement, that there are severe consequences out of that. And sometimes we don't notice it because these children are young, and especially before they go to, but as a matter of fact, in a lot of kindergarten teachers will tell you that this kid, he's a devil, she's a little devil, and they can almost see it. You follow? And so what we are seeing early, but in some instances, there aren't any real remedial program for kids that are struggling early. You don't have that. And part of that might be because there aren't enough financial resources to go. And that's why I always say to people, if you're going to have a kid that is you're going to have a disability of any kind, you need to be either in California or you need to be in New York, because those are the two most generous states, and and they are democratic states, obviously. And so, but they really put a lot of money into helping families in terms of children with disabilities, in terms of our school system. But there are some other islands that they don't have the financial resources to develop cutting edge, special ed programs. And therefore teachers are struggling with that. And so we have these little makeshift that we do. And part of the makeshift is suspension. You get rid of these kids. But you have to ask yourself, when you suspend a child, what is this child doing at home? I used to, when I worked in the middle school, we had a principal, and he would say, no, we will not do any suspension. You are going to come in my office and you're going to stay there all day. I don't care what you do. You're not going to go home. Because you see, there's nobody at home. And this principal had a holistic approach to things. If you're going to mess up, there'll be no suspension. You're going to come to my office. The teachers are going to bring your homework there, and you're going to sit there all day. You're going to have your lunch in my office, and you're going to do whatever you need to do. That was his philosophy, because he understood that in many of these homes, there are no parents. So sending a child home can be a problem. And so that's why maybe in St. Vincent, you may notice a lot of our young people that are suspended, they're out in the street. They're wherever they're doing, getting into trouble. But that might be because they don't have enough financial resources available to be able to cater for all of these kids. Because a lot of these disabled kids, you can't have them in a classroom with 45 kids, especially if they have ADHD and some of those other, pragmatic issues, kids who are on the spectrum. You're going to have small classrooms. Not only have small classrooms, but you're going to have, teachers' aides, and sometimes a student may need an adult sitting right next to them, and they don't have the financial resources. And I worked, for over 27 years in special ed, and we're talking about classroom with 6 kids, with probably 8 adults in that classroom. A teacher's aide. And each child has his own individual aid in that classroom. And then that child has a social worker, and it receives counseling. There's a psychologist that they see every day. I mean, so we're talking about the difference in terms. So when people say to me, poverty it doesn't matter, I don't know what they're talking about. Okay. Because it does take money, a lot of money, to be able to move a child with that level of disability to be able to provide the remedial services so that they can become a productive citizen and still be able to have their education and be able to graduate with their peers and receive a degree. It takes a lot to do that. So money is involved, but a lot of our parents don't have the resources. A lot of our parents don't have the ability to be able to go to the school and attend meetings and be able to sit in terms of collaborative intervention, be able to do what needed to be done, so that the social worker and the psychologist would have a better makeup of what's going on and how well their children are doing. So a child need stability. They need security. They need to feel accepted. They need to feel that the family do in fact care. But also, I think kids need to know that their families are respected. Because children know when their family aren't respected, okay? And that disrespect is then transformed into where they may begin to think there's something wrong with me. And that's one of the downside, I think, with a lot of African kids, where racism, that's part of the impact that children have when they begin to feel that because of their color, then they must be inferior. And then that they begin to internalize that. And sometimes even they get it from their parents, where the parents begin to reflect that in terms of the arguments that they're having on the phone and stuff that's going on with them. And so children begin to internalize all of those things. And one of the things that we'll be looking at, maybe not tonight, but it's the impact of mental illness on children. Because the parent who's had the mental illness, children experience it and they live the mental illness as well. And that certainly have a tremendous impact. So children need a community where they can be nurtured, where they can grow, and it takes an adult, a caring adult, to create that environment, but not only to create it in terms of make the safety, but being able to model that. And I think that's where we can rely on our social workers, our psychologists, and our counselors to be able to provide parenting skills classes to our parents, especially our young parents who are struggling with. I have a couple right now who she's taking a whole, because her daughter has had a baby, and so she said, "No, I got to be there because she's not. This is her first child, and I know she's going to be struggling. So I'm going to be there because I want to help out." But not all of our children, our young couples, have those kinds of resources, and so we have to. And that's where, as a church, we have to begin to go beyond that Sunday morning experience and to create programs where we can now, it says Jesus grew in every which aspect. And, we don't stop to think about this, that Jesus had a mother and he had a Joseph, who seemed to have been a righteous man and created an environment so that this young boy can grow up. And so many of our young men don't have a mom and a dad. And if they they may have a mom, but the mom is so busy that mom is not available. And so our children need access. They need access to basic resources as well. I believe that they need adequate health care. I believe that our children need clean drinking water. They need a place to sleep at night. They need a place where they can concentrate and do their homework. They need light that they can see. They need to feel, and if they know that that's not there, but the other classroom friends have all of those things, that I think have an impact on how the child begin to internalize about how he feels about himself. So I'm saying to us, we have, as a family, in a religious community, we have to be concerned enough to ensure that all of our members are well being cared for. I was speaking just this evening to a member of another denomination and Jehovah's Witness, actually, and we were commenting how a lot of the other denominations, that they will start a building and it may take them 10 years to get the roof on that building, and how when the Jehovah's Witness, when they decide to build a building in a location, everybody come from all over, even England, over the world, come together that day, and the building is up in a week. I mean, they know how to work because they see themselves as a community, as members, and they do things together, all of their resources together. So I said to him, there's a book that they have that I want. He said, no, it's all free. Just go to this website. Everything we do is free. You don't have to pay for it, because they are serious in what they do. And so I'm saying to us, we, in this Christian world, we have to go beyond just talking about it and preaching about it. We have to create programs that are going to make a difference in the lives of people. People are suffering. A lot of our children are suffering. There are many of our children that are suffering, and some of the wounds you can't see. There's not like they have bandage on that you can see, but the internal assault that they receive every day on their personal sense of identity of who they are as a person, the level of shame that they feel and they carry every day, has a tremendous impact. And so that is why a lot of our young people, the suicidal rate is increasing among our young people, because of that internal wound that they carry, that pain that they carry within themselves. And that, of course, the perpetrator of all of that, maybe a mom who is on crack and cocaine, or a dad who is drunk every weekend and coming home and acting like a fool in the house. To a lot of our children, those experiences are near-death experiences. Some kids just go and they go into their bed and just pretend they don't hear anything. They go into fantasy land. And sooner or later, when they become good at that, We put a label on it. We call it a psychotic disorder, and then we start medicating them. And that's what it is. A lot of our children, that's the kind of experience that they're having. And so we need to begin to be aware of what, in terms of identifying. Yes, they may need to memorize some Bible verses. They may need to do all of these things. But there are concrete services that our children need. I think it was one of those psychologists, I can't even remember his name right now, that says, once these basic needs are met, so there's hunger and some of these basic needs, then once those needs are met, then people begin to work on the aspirations and their self-esteem. And Maslow, I think it is, that made that statement, and he was correct. We have to begin to feed, and you can talk of the Bible all you want, and the person is hungry. We've got to begin to take care of that. If a family is struggling with cancer or dialysis or kidney failure, whatever, all of that's going to have a tremendous impact on the family. The financial resources that is happening, and the children in those families are going to be struggling. And so as a Christian community, we have to begin to identify what the mission is when Jesus commands us to go and make disciples. So I'm saying to us, though, in our society, that there are some substitute needs. When we substitute those needs that we're talking about in terms of empathy and stability, and once we substitute those, what we find is a toxic environment. And what we see in those are the level of violence. Because if you don't have it on one end, you substitute something else. And that something else becomes violence, nastiness, insecurity, isolation, poverty. All of these are substitutes for what is missing. And so when I talk to you about those 5 young men that were killed on that island this week, we're talking about something that's missing in them, that they got involved in some other way of life in order to fill something that was lacking in their life. That man who went this week into Manhattan, into that office building, and killed 5 people and then turned the gun on himself, there was something missing in his life. And so, we can't dissect all of that, but I'm saying that's not normal behavior, that there is something inherently wrong. And that's what we're seeing in our society today. And we certainly need, once you substitute in our children, if they don't get these basic needs that they have, there are going to be substitutes. That is why you have the crack epidemic. It becomes a substitute in order to heal the pain and the wound that people feel, except it doesn't work. It only further enslaves them and get them into more trouble. Obesity, all of this that we see happening in our society. Most of our kids these days, and many of our young men, they drop the 9th grade. And the reason that they drop out of the 9th grade is because the law in the United States, that is in New York, they won't allow you to drop out of school in the 8th grade because the parents are the ones going to be held responsible. And they're going to draw those to family court. But once a child reaches 9, in the 9th grade, then the parents, he's now free to come. And in some instances, the school is happy that he's no longer coming because he was a nightmare in the middle school. He was a nightmare in elementary. He was a nightmare in the middle school. Now he gets to the 9th grade and they're so happy he's not here anymore. But where does he go? He's in the community, packing drugs, selling drugs, packing a gun. So he's either going to wind up in the cemetery or he's going to wind up in the prison. Either way. But he's not going to last very long. And so what I'm saying to us is, Jesus asked us that we ought to go and make disciples. And I think that this is not just about proselyting. This is about telling mom and dad to be able to take this youngster that God has blessed you with, that youngster that is now embedded with the divine DNA, that is now blessed, that to take that and to transform it into God's glory so that he can become a responsible citizen and make meaningful contribution and live his life and start a family. That's what it is. And so we have to begin to prepare our families for these responsibilities. And if we can't do that, then let's not be critical about crime and violence and all this stuff that's going on. Let's shut our mouth, shut down, tone down, unless you're going to recognize the problem and begin to work in that direction and try to make a difference. So I'm saying to us tonight, Moynihan, and I'm not really sure, and I think that somebody showed me just this week that this statement actually was made by President Reagan, but I think Daniel Patrick Moynihan, I think, made the statement first. I'm not sure who did. But the statement is the family is the cornerstone of society. And I think when I go through, if you Google that, you're going to see that Reagan is the person who made that statement. But I think that Patrick Moynihan was the senator in New York, and he wrote a book. And I think he made a statement because he said, and I quote him, this is what he said. He says, more than any other force, he talked about the family. It shapes the attitude, the hopes, the ambition, and the value of the child. It's talking about the family. And that's how important it is. That is the responsibility of a mother and a father. We're talking about the nuclear family here. And I know that we are in a place now where we no longer want to talk about the nuclear family. It's almost offensive to talk about the nuclear family. But I want to let you know here that it is God's will when he created this nuclear family, the way he set it up. And that is the best family. And that's how if we want to have a healthy society, a healthy community, and have our children raised the way that God designed them, engineered them to be, let us put the nuclear family as a priority. And this is what God wants. And that is how we ought to do it. And so Moynihan is saying that the family itself, it shapes our attitudes and our hopes and our ambitions and the value of the child. It is, children tend to copy their parents. And so if a child is socialized in a home where the dad is yelling every time he wants something and he starts hitting, eventually the child starts practicing that. And the son will start hitting his sister because that's how you get things done. And eventually he goes to school and he starts practicing the same behavior. And then he gets suspended, and it happens. This cycle is a vicious cycle. Whatever you sow, you will reap. And so this gentleman, Patrick, is saying to us that the family is a cornerstone. I quoted this. I want to quote this again. He says, so unless we work to strengthen the family, to create conditions under which most parents will stay together. And he's emphasizing that. He's saying, unless we create conditions where parents, both mom and dad, will stay together at all costs, schools and playgrounds, public assistance and private concern will never be enough to cut completely the cycle of despair and desperation. What this man is simply saying is, don't play with the family. Let us put our money in the family. Let us keep families together. Let us strengthen family. Let us give them the resource that they need to build healthy, strong families. And we wouldn't have to build prisons. That's what he's really implying. We don't have to build prisons anymore. Because if we do what we need to do for our children, by enhancing our families, help them to be good at what they do, that God designed them to do, then we wouldn't have to put the money over here. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't, in the United States, we spend more money in military hardware, in bombs and nuclear weapons. We spend so much billions and trillions on that, and how much do we spend on education? Not much, do we? Spend little on that. But if we reverse that, and put the money in those areas, then maybe we will do a lot better as a family. So what I'm saying to us tonight, and I didn't get to say a lot of what I wanted to say, but time is sort of gone here. Let me just make sure before I end, just make sure that there are any more comment within those critical years. What influence does the mother and the child versus the influence of the dad and the male and so on? I really believe the divine pattern is that the mother, I think, has a tremendous role in that nurturing role. But also, I think you need to have the father, because you have to have both to influence. I think the girl has to see the other side of the father, and the boy needs to see the other side. So I think it's a team affair, and I think they both must work together because they both have elements in them that they must bring out within the family, the system. And I think that's the way that God designed it to be. And I think that's why I think this one parenting situation it's really exhausting. I really think it's exhausting to have one parent. And I was talking to one of my young friend, and he was talking about when he goes home to work, because the mom is so tired and she goes straight to bed. No, he has to do the rest of the work with the baby and stuff like that because she's so tired. Okay. But it takes two to be able to do this. And now I noticed that in our system, that most of the grandmothers now are becoming, taking over the role, and they now become the babysitters, and that can be quite exhausting as well. Although the grandmothers enjoy that because it's the second time around and so on, and they enjoy that. But I think the family system, it's what I think that's truly important. I hope I did answer your question. I'm not sure if I did. What are the specific characteristics? And we will get to some of the specific characteristics as we go through this series. But I just wanted to sort of, lay some introductory kinds of things and make some statements. But we'll get more detail as we begin to really talk about that. But what I'm saying to us tonight, that children carry around scars that happen in the home that will live forever, and it becomes a serious problem. And a lot of our mental health problems that we witness today really have its roots. And so we have to begin to do that. And so we have to begin to work together as religious organization. And I think, it's easy for preachers sometimes to point fingers at politicians, but at the same time, their buildings are locked up and they don't use it for anything. But I think we have to begin to work together as a people and begin to make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of our children. And I think the caller who mentioned earlier, he was talking about, who in terms of election time, what do we do in those times? And I think as Christians, we can't back off. We have to begin to evaluate the politician and see what is it that they are bringing to the table that are going to enrich our families in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of, law enforcement. What is it that they're bringing to the table that we can say, okay, reasonable, I'm going to trust you in delivering these kinds of things? Because if we don't make those decisions, they are going to make decisions. Somebody will. You can't have, remember I said earlier, you can't have equality. You can't exercise your freedom unless you have a political, because it's a political concept. It's all a political concept. And you're going to have, government to be able to ensure that you can enjoy your freedom and to live at peace. And so all of that is important. So I truly want to thank you all tonight, and I will continue this program. And I hope that, I haven't offended. I hope I haven't offended any of you. And I truly apologize for Jack. I should not have used his name, but it just so happened. It was easy for me to do, and I did. But I apologize to him if I did offend him in any way. Let me make sure. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And come on, I want to thank you for your patience, not cutting me off. Actually, it's about 5 minutes. So you're generous tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm always a generous guy.
I will remember that. So, but thank you so much, and God bless.
Definitely, you're welcome. Well, I want to thank you, Doctor. Would you be there'll be a continuation of
Oh
part
yes, oh
two?
yes. I'm going to do a whole series on this.
All right, so you could just give me a heads up, so that I can continue to promote the program, so that we
Go
can
ahead. It will
get
be
as much
continuing.
engagement as possible.
Continuing. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Davis. As always, it's a pleasure having you each and every Wednesday here on WeFM. God's will, we hope to have you again next week. All things being equal. Thank you very much. Well, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we're 6 minutes after 10 o'clock, and it's time for me